Alright, well, those of you that are familiar with this game will recognize the screenshot as being Dominion, specifically the version of the game that is available on BSW, as well as several cards, treasures, actions, and the always popular curses. Well, to start things off, I am not an expert player. I have about 40 to 50 games under my belt, so I like to think that I have some grasp on the game, and I do recall that getting to that point was a bit of a struggle, I guess you could say, or at the very least wasn't that pleasant when you were finishing games with negative points. So as an effort to kind of smooth the learning curve, I've decided to take this little sample set and analyze it and walk you through my thinking process in terms of analyzing what's going on. Now, without further ado, I'm looking at this set right now and I'm seeing 3 attack cards, I'm seeing the chapel, I'm seeing the throne room. I'm thinking this is really going to be a game based around attacking your opponent. So, I also see the moat, and see, that's definitely going to be a very hot item this game, if only to keep yourself safe from militias and swindlers, which I'll cover later on. So, now to begin, the moat. Look at it, and it gives you 2 cards, and whenever an opponent plays an attack, you can counter it with this card. It's a wonderful thing to use against witches, especially combos of the throne room into the witch, which can leave you hurting with 2 curse cards. So, really that's the chief purpose, but what the real appeal of it is that it's not bad. I mean, 2 cards is only 1 less than a smithy gives you, and it costs half of that. So if you end up in a 5-2 split, that is to say a situation in which you have 5 copper in one hand, 2 in the other, it's not a bad buy by any means. So it's something I would recommend if you're in that situation. However, the card right next to it, the chapel, really kind of puts the damper on the whole moat bandwagon. The chapel is by far one of the best cards in the game, and really within the confines of this video I don't feel like I can do it justice. With the chapel you achieve something that is so hard to obtain, especially later in the game, and that's consistency. The ability to evaluate and predict what is going to happen next in the game, specifically what you're going to draw. With the chapel you can trim yourself down to nothing but gold and things that link into it, like combos such as minions and festivals and laboratories, and more or less maybe buy 1, or even if you're really lucky, 2 provinces a turn, which just is game changing to be able to do that consistently. So I'm going to move on from the chapel. I mean, if you really are that interested, there are entire articles that you could look for that will summarize what it is, how to evaluate it, and all of the wonderful things that you're able to do with that card. Moving on, you see the Swindler, the first of the attack actions that I will cover. On the surface, it's plus 2 coins and the ability to get rid of an opponent's card and replace it with something else. Now, early in the game, the 2 coins is great, but what's even better is that you have a good chance of nabbing a copper, and you'll also notice that curses have the same cost, so yes, you can trash a copper and force your opponent to take a curse, which is a very good way of screwing with them early on. In fact, as much of a dick move as it is, I would recommend it. But later on, you're going to find out that you're going to start bumping into things like gold and provinces, more with increasing frequency, which is problematic in and of itself because, well, what can I recycle a gold or a province into specifically in this set? And the answer is nothing. So if you go ahead and you swindle, at least if you're not doing it in a combo, you're really just getting 2 coins and that's it, and there are much more effective ways to spend your action. Going on to it, you see the Baron, a personal favorite of mine, plus 1 buy, the ability to get an estate, but also the ability to sacrifice an estate for 4 coins. A wonderful move early on because it allows you to not only get rid of that estate that's not helping you, but to replace it with something more expensive like a gold or a spy, a militia, a smithy, anything that you think is better off in your deck. It's absolutely wonderful, and again, going back to that whole theme of consistency and how much it changes the game, the Baron is a huge asset in that, as is the Moneylender, which I haven't been fortunate enough to cover, but it allows you to trash a copper for 3 coins. So a copper into a gold for the confine of that 1 turn is a huge advantage, especially early on. So let's say you use that 3 coins to buy an actual gold, you have improved your deck substantially, especially in the early phase of the game. And later on, if you see a remodel in the set, you could remodel them into gold themselves. So great cards to have. Going over to the Spy. The Spy is a good card. It suffers from the same pitfalls as the Swindler, and that later on, you maybe aren't grabbing what you really need to be effective. But if let's say your opponent buys a Witch, and then you buy a Spy, and you prevent them from picking up that card within their first cycle or their first opportunity, you've really deprived them of some momentum, and it replaces itself both as an action and a card in your hand. So it's not bad, but you want to avoid falling into the pitfalls of just kind of stocking up on them, as often happens with the village, because at the end of the day, with each of those cycles, they're really not producing something like combos with the laboratory do, where with each cycle of it, you get an additional card. For those of you who don't know, the laboratory allows you to get 2 cards and 1 action. Now, again, moving on to the militia, it's a great way of slowing down the game. Early on, it's good. It might as well be a silver in your hand as long as it's not competing with any other actions. And again, it bumps your opponent down, slows things, and kind of gives you that momentum. One thing you might want to worry about, though, with playing a militia is that your opponent is probably going to pick up their own because of that differences within momentum that it starts up, which can slow down and ultimately bite you in the ass. So just keep that in mind. The Smithy, a great card early on, +3. It actually works really well in combos, and I'll come back to this later on, but just suffice it to say, very good. I'd recommend it. Works very well. But now, going back to this idea of consistency, you can see the Thief. Now, on the surface and early on in the game, you can think, I can nab my opponent's gold out of his hand if that's what he decides to buy early on, or the silver that he bought with his 3-coin hand. But the problem with this line of thinking is that ultimately, towards the end of the game, copper, which is much more frequent than silver and gold, doesn't help you at all. It actually hinders you by throwing off the consistency of your deck. So, on one hand, you are hurting your opponent, but it's going to hurt you in the end. And I've seen many opponents lose the game to me because they kept nabbing copper out of my deck early on, and they were sitting with a 30, 40 card deck that really wasn't consistent, wasn't doing anything in terms of getting them victory points, while I just coasted through and nabbed provinces and just ended the game that way. However, it is specifically in this set, you also have the appeal of the chapel. So if you can pick that up, I would say, by all means, you could grab this copper from your opponent, and then as soon as it stops helping you, you can just say, okay, I'm going to trash it. And then get your deck back into line, pick up that consistency that you want. So, again, in sum, it's good but risky, and oftentimes will bite you in the ass in the end of the game. But now the Throne Room, which is right next to it, is another wonderful card. I wouldn't recommend buying it right away, though, because it's not good unless you have other actions to use it. But a Throne Room to a Baron early on allows you to ditch 2 estates, get 2 additional buys, and 8 coins. That is game-changing early on. It could allow you to replace those estates with silver, gold, better actions, whatnot. But this is another thing that I feel really is quintessential to understand, and actually has been requested of me to explain, is let's say you have a spy in a Throne Room. You play the Throne Room first, and you play the spy. The first one replaces itself in your hand and gives you an action. The second one goes off and gives you an additional card, which more or less just covers the Throne Room, but also gives you a superfluous action that you don't need to really worry about, which means that now you don't have to worry about saying, okay, I have to link this into this all the time, i.e. a spy into a spy. You can keep your combos going even if you add a Smithy into the mix, which expands your array of actions and your possibilities. So a wonderful card to have. It's really dependent on the set, but it really can pay off in the end. The upgrade, again, the same array, +1 card, +1 action, and trash a card in your hand, and gain a card, meaning really one of the better appeals for this in any set is trashing copper. But yeah, I mean, it's not one of the best 5s. I'd rather buy festivals or markets and all of that. So, but it still has that wonderful appeal. You can use it to get rid of curses and pick up copper, I suppose, and then trash, or just trash curses outright. So, really, that's this set. And hopefully, I mean, if this goes off well and people find this helpful, I will put together a additional video, maybe covering Chapel, maybe covering another set of cards. But really, things to keep in mind, just general tips. Keep consistency in mind. Manage your deck size. Always have a plan. Think of where you want to be in the next 2 or 3 turns. And the big thing here that I really can't stress enough, in general, don't buy down. I mean, oftentimes with a Chapel, maybe if you have 3 copper in hand, but oftentimes it will pay off, even if it's not immediately helpful, to buy a silver instead of a moat if you have the option to do so. Well, again, I'm running out of time here, but I hope this was helpful, and happy gaming.